Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ironman African Champs race recap and breakdown where no one could have predicted what would just happen this weekend. Boy oh boy, was it a race for the underdogs, and once again, the script can be ripped up and just thrown away. These fairy tale storylines often tend to happen when so much is on the line, and as a championship race here in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, there were 4 slots on offer for the men and the women for the world champs, as well as a $150,000 prize purse for the top athletes who managed to survive what would end up being an extremely brutal day. And thank goodness there were a lot of fans out, as always, at this race, because they would need every bit of support they could get. And actually, a lot of them, it wasn't enough. 7 DNFs on the men's side and 4 on the women's side really highlighted how brutal it was. Now, oftentimes brutal conditions mean a shortened swim at Ironman South Africa, but for this race, it was a full swim. So we're going to dive into the men's race first, and we had a stacked start list here of guys looking for those coveted world champ slots. We had the likes of Ineos Grenadiers pro cyclist Cameron Worth, Danish powerhouse Ironman athlete Matthias Pedersen, Matt Troutman, the South African athlete who had a lot of fans cheering for him here, as well as Bart Arnault, Andy Dreitz, a lot of other familiar names you'd probably recognize. But in the water, it was all about Josh Amberger. As we all know, he is one of the best Ironman swimmers in the sport, and with these choppy, tough conditions, it really favored him. He ended up coming out of the water 2 minutes up on a small chase pack and was in a good position for the rest of the day. But in that chase pack, he probably wouldn't be happy to hear that Cameron Worth was there, so we know Josh Amberger's gap wasn't going to last long. In that chase pack as well was Leonard Arnold, Matt Troutman, and Matthias Pedersen, and those are all great cyclists, but none quite as good as Cameron Worth, who would eventually move up quickly to the front of the bike, overtake Josh, and drop him before long. But there was one other big mover in the field, and that was the Terminator himself, Rasmus Svenningsson, a Swedish athlete who won Ironman Lake Placid back in 2021, has been struggling with a long-term hip injury, but everything today was clicking into place, and he was absolutely flying. He was showing pro cyclist Cameron Worth how to ride a bike, outsplitting him on the bike by 6 minutes in the end, coming into transition 3 minutes up. Now, everybody else behind them was much further back. On a tough, windy day, it really favored these strong cyclists, and it was 9 minutes back to Leonard Arnold, 11 minutes back to Matthias Pedersen, and 13 minutes back to Bart Arnault. It was most likely going to be a podium fight between these 5, but it seemed like the win was going to come between Rasmus and Cameron Worth. Right away on the run, Cameron started catching Rasmus, and slowly but surely he whittled away at that lead until just over the halfway mark he was running with Rasmus before surging ahead and creating a small gap. It looked like Cameron had just saved enough for the marathon to take another Ironman victory here, but out of nowhere, it seemed like the tables turned once more. Cameron began to fade on the run while Rasmus found another gear and increased his pace. And slowly but surely, he would gain that lead back and extend it out, while Matthias Pedersen was charging from behind and outrunning everyone by a significant amount. Eventually, Rasmus would hold on for the win. Cameron would fall back to third, Matthias would pick up that second place spot, and Leonard Arnold would finish in fourth, picking up the final Kona World Championship slot. It was an unbelievably close finish, neck and neck between Rasmus and Cameron, and who knows if Cameron could have held on a little bit longer if he could have got the win. But fantastic result for Rasmus, who had so much promise in 2021. It was ranked 15 in the world, and it looks like he is right there on his way back, and he will be really fun to watch in Kona with that incredible bike power. But let's move on to the women's race, because this one was equally as dramatic. Going into the race, all eyes were on Daniela Ryf, arguably the greatest female triathlete to ever do the sport, especially across the Ironman distance, and most people, probably including her competitors, thought she was a shoe-in for the win and her Nice World Championship slot before the gun even went off. However, on a day with tough conditions, like Rasmus showed on the men's side, anything could happen. And right away, as they dove into the swim, Marta Sanchez began to shake things up. She moved to the front and set a pace that no one else could go with, and eventually she would leave everyone quite far behind. She had a breakthrough year in 2023 and has just been rising up the ranks. She won 70.3 Pucon right at the beginning of this year, and then also got an 11th place at the T100 race in Miami last month. So all the signs were there for Marta to have a great race. She ended up finishing the 3.8K swim in 52 minutes, which was just phenomenal considering those conditions. The next person out of the water was 4 minutes later. It was Susie Cheatham of Great Britain. Daniela Ryf and Marlon de Boer were just behind her, and then Daniela Blymel trailed behind in 5th place. Now out onto the bike, and as you'd expect, Daniela Ryf was making her way to the front. However, that was only for about 40 kilometers, and from there on out, she would begin to slow down and actually start losing time to the front. The biggest movers on the bike in the field were Daniela Blymel, who would eventually overtake Marta Sanchez, as well as Didi Diedrichs, who got within 42 seconds by the time they hit transition 2. But Blymel had a phenomenal bike ride. Ended up coming into T2 3 minutes and 51 seconds ahead of Sanchez, despite being all that time back out of the swim. It was just an insane ride that would have had Rasmus Svenningsen really proud. Diedrichs never managed to quite catch Sanchez, but she was only 45 seconds down in transition, while Marlon de Boer was 5 minutes and 27 seconds back from the front, and then Daniela Ryf, Susie Cheatham, and Laura Zimmerman were over 9 minutes back to Daniela Blymel, and it looked like it was her race to lose at this point. But still, with a marathon to go on a tough day like this, absolutely anything could happen, and even Daniela Ryf could still walk away with the win. However, in the early stages of the marathon, Didi Diedrich surged forward, and it looked like she was in prime position, very similar to Cameron Wurf, to take the win here. She eventually overtook Marta Sanchez for second place within the first 10 kilometers, and then slowly but surely closed the gap to Blymel, reducing the lead to less than a minute by the halfway point. Unfortunately, things weren't going so well for Daniela Ryf, as she consistently lost time throughout the marathon. It clearly just wasn't her day. But back to the front of the race, and things were getting closer than ever because Marta Sanchez began to mount a comeback just like Rasmus did after Cameron Wurf caught him. It was then a three-way battle, it looked like, between Marta, Didi Diedrichs, and Daniela Blymel. However, it was Marta who would press on and have the freshest legs throughout the marathon. Didi Diedrichs began to fade, and Daniela Blymel eventually dropped out of the race entirely. So Marta held on for the win, eventually coming in with a run finish time of 3:07:35, outrunning Didi Diedrichs by 2 minutes. And then Laura Zimmerman had the second fastest run of the day with a 3:05 to land her a third place finish and a spot at the Nice Ironman World Championships. Marlon de Boer took 4th, Susie Cheatham took 5th, and then Daniela Ryf finished all the way back in 8th place. But seriously, another impressive performance for Marta Sanchez, who just doesn't have a weakness right now. And with a swim like that, she could be a serious competitor at that World Championships coming up in September. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed these recaps. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. So much more exciting racing to come with the next Pro Series race taking place next week in Texas. We'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye.